more than half a century, Palestinians and Israelis have been locked in a deadly struggle over conflicting claims in what many call the Holy Land. The violence of each side against the other breaks out again and again. Unless there is real progress toward a settlement, there will almost surely be more Palestinian suicide bombings, more rocket attacks, more Israeli retaliatory strikes. The military occupation and resistance to it will continue. Painful suffering on both sides. What can the United States do to make sure that this conflict is ended in a fair and reasonable peace? That is one of the highest priority issues on the Obama administration's foreign policy agenda. I'm Landrum Bolling, a one-time foreign correspondent, later professor, college president, currently an advisor for non-governmental programs of humanitarian assistance and reconciliation in the Middle East. In that role and on other assignments in the region, I came to know a remarkable group of Israeli, Palestinian, and American leaders, all deeply concerned about how to end the violence. Among them are four of our most knowledgeable senior American statesmen. They are President Jimmy Carter, former Secretary of State James Baker, and two veteran foreign policy experts, General Brent Scowcroft and Dr. Zbigniew Brzezinski, both of whom served as national security advisors in the White House. All four see an emerging new hope for peace in the Middle East if bold and determined actions are now taken by the United States. Faced with all of the terrible things that have happened between the Palestinians and Israelis that continue to happen, the war in Gaza, the continuing of the occupation, and with the growing sense of bitterness and frustration, many people are saying that peace is not really possible. Are you still hopeful that a peace can be made?
Well, I am. I never have lost faith in the possibility or probability of inevitability of peace. And the reason I say that is because the overwhelming majority of Israelis and Palestinians, whether they're Fatah or Hamas, the overwhelming portion of the Syrians and the Lebanese and Jordanians, they all want peace. And if you run public opinion polls, they've been consistent for the last 30 years or so. Absolutely. 60% or more of the people want peace. Sometimes they go up to 80%.
The vast majority of the Israeli body politic are tired of being a nation perpetually at war. They want to see a peace agreement. They want to see a secure peace agreement. And so do the Palestinian people. There are some elements of the Palestinian polity who sound an awful lot like they don't want to see peace. But the vast majority of the Palestinian people, I think, do want peace, and I know the vast majority of the Israeli people do. A comprehensive peace and a sustained and lasting peace.
There's no question about the extent of the bitterness, but I think paradoxically that gives us an opportunity. But I think we have to change our way of doing things. And no longer can we sit down and say, we'll provide the table and we hope you, the Palestinians, and you, the Israelis, can come to a deal. We've got to play a more active role.
I basically agree with Brent. Frustration is widespread, and ultimately neither side is really prepared to make the necessary concessions. It takes a constructive, impartial, energetic, outside mediator to push the process forward. And there's only one candidate who can fill these qualifications, and that is the United States, and more specifically, the President of the United States.
Make no mistake about it, the United States is the indispensable party in terms of getting a peace deal negotiated between Arabs and Israelis because of our relationship with Israel. No American administration will ever abandon Israel.
There's no point assigning blame and saying this one is more responsible than the other one. It's a tragic situation. Two decent peoples are locked in a mortal embrace, and they cannot move towards peace unless someone really helps them.
How do you deal with the question of what people you talk to.
You have to talk to people. You have to talk to people. You talk to your enemies like we did when we encouraged them to attend the Madrid conference and break the old taboo that Arabs and Israelis, or that Palestinians and Israelis and other Arabs and Israelis wouldn't talk to each other.
We were talking about Hamas, and I gather you think that we should find a way to talk to Hamas.
First of all, I think we ought to offer to talk to Hamas. I see nothing to be gained by ostracizing them. There's more than one Hamas. It is not a monolithic force.
Absolutely.
And the Hamas group inside Gaza has different perspective from the Hamas group, the two Hamas groups in Damascus. And in addition, I think if the peace process got moving, Hamas won't want to be left out of it. It will give them a tremendous incentive to come back in and participate.
Find a way, find a construct where Hamas where the views and commitments of Hamas can be obtained. And again, I get back to what I said earlier. We were faced with this same situation in 1991 with the PLO. We couldn't talk to PLO. Israel wouldn't talk to PLO. But we found a construct that worked. And the same thing can be done today. But you can't make peace with people if you're not willing to talk to them.
We have to recognize also the fact that there's also tremendous diversity on the Israeli side.
Sure.
We have to talk to everyone if we want to move towards peace.
How do you see the reasons that explain why there's been so much difficulty in getting an agreement?
I think it's because the leaders of Israel, for various reasons, political and deep religious beliefs and political beliefs, for the last 30 years have resolved that they're not going to withdraw from the occupied territories, from the West Bank. Even when I was still in office, there was some move in this direction. As you may know, after the Camp David Accords, after the peace treaty between Israel and Egypt, under Prime Minister Begin, they continued to build a few settlements, and then, of course, that has escalated over a period of time. I think the most settlements in history were made during the time of President Clinton, and when Prime Minister Barack was in office. There was almost an unrestrained increase in the number of settlements in. But I think the desire of leaders in Israel to occupy and colonize the land in the West Bank, that's been the key problem.
The hardliners on both sides are the biggest obstacles to achieving peace between Arabs and Israelis. And those hardliners are Arabs who will not acknowledge Israel's right to exist, and Israelis who want to keep the occupied territories. And you just have to reconcile yourself, and the vast majority of Palestinians and Israelis, or Arabs and Israelis, to the idea that the absolutists on each side have got to be overcome.
I think public opinion there has been fairly consistent when you give it to them in generic question. Would you be willing to exchange land for peace?
They say yes.
The answer is yes. We would be willing to give up the West Bank in order to have permanent peace. Of course, what the political leaders know very shrewdly is the more they can issue the premise or the belief that peace is not possible, security for Israel is not possible, then they say, well, we don't want to give up the land then. Sure. So I think that's been the repetitive problem. And of course, there have been some irresponsible decisions made by Palestinians as well. Sure. You know, with the suicide bombers and the attacks that have wreaked havoc and fear among completely innocent civilians, children and women. That's been an unforgivable act that has greatly exacerbated the already serious problem.
The commission that you and Congressman Lee Hamilton headed that produced the Iraq study report had some specific things to say about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and how it might be settled. Could you sort of summarize those for us?
But let me just read you very briefly, Landrum, what we say. The United States will not be able to achieve all of its goals in the Middle East unless it deals directly with the Arab-Israeli conflict. There has to be a renewed and sustained commitment by the United States to a comprehensive Arab-Israeli peace on all fronts. This commitment has to include direct talks with, by, and between Israel, Lebanon, Palestinians, those who accept Israel's right to exist, and particularly Syria. The United States does its ally Israel no favors in avoiding direct involvement to solve the Arab-Israeli conflict. There is no military solution to this conflict. It's not going to be solved militarily. The vast majority of the Israeli body politic, as I said earlier, wants to see peace. They're tired of being a nation perpetually at war. And we have to keep in mind that no American administration, whether it's Democrat or Republican, will ever abandon Israel. Political engagement and dialogue are essential in the Arab-Israeli disputes, and the only basis on which peace can be achieved, in our view, is pursuant to UN Resolutions 242 and 338.
At various times, both of you have made statements about the fact that there's a virtual package deal on the table already, that both Palestinians and Israelis know pretty much what the deal would be. How would you define that deal?
Well, you know, by the end of the Clinton administration, the Taba Accords had set out basically the four major areas of contention: 67 borders, Jerusalem shared, no right of return, and a non-militarized Palestinian state. And there was broad agreement on that. Now, that covers a lot of details that need to be worked out. But it's not as if we were starting afresh.
If you look at the Geneva proposal, yes. If you look at the policies of the International Quartet, if you look at the U.S. Government official policies, and if you look at the international orders issued from the Security Council resolutions, and if you look at the unanimous decision of the Arab countries to offer Israel peace, they're all exactly the same.
It will be two states living side by side in peace and hopefully security and peace. Right. There will be many of the settlements that have been built in the areas immediately surrounding Jerusalem will be retained by the Israelis. Palestinians will be given an equal amount of land elsewhere to make up for the loss of that territory. The Palestinians will have some place in or close to Jerusalem that they could claim as their capital. The right of return will end up being, in my view, a right to return to the Palestinian state, and there will be compensation for lands that have been taken.
And both sides have had the chance to discuss this at length.
At length.
But no one from the outside, at the level that we're talking about, namely the President of the United States, has been willing to take the bit in his teeth and say, this is the position of the United States. And incidentally, if he says that, it will not be just the position of the United States. I would be willing to bet you, Landrum, I would be willing to bench you a lot of money that almost every country in the world would endorse it.
Including the Arabs.
Well, of course the Arabs, but the Asians and Latin Americans and Europeans.
And this is one of the reasons the president needs to step up and say, this is the American proposal, so that the Palestinians can go back, the Palestinian leadership can go back to people, the Israeli leadership can go back and say, you know, this is not exactly what we would want, but the Americans made us do it.
Right. Yep. You've talked about the fact that a package deal would be supported by governments all over the world, including the Arabs. Now, some time ago, the New York Times ran a full-page ad sponsored by Arab governments saying that they were prepared to make a complete and solid peace with Israel. Do you think this is a sincere proposal the Arabs have put forward?
Look, I don't care if it's sincere or not sincere. The fact is, if the United States came out with what Brent and I are talking about, they would back it, and that's what's important. What's in their heads or in their hearts, look, one can speculate, but it's not constructive.
And there is an Arab proposal that was made first in 2002, but has since been reiterated by King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia, that if there is a deal, that the Arab states will recognize Israel, normalize relationships with Israel. That's a very positive statement that supports what's on that page.
And if the president speaks up decisively and strongly in favor of peace, outlines what the basic parameters of peace ought to be, and as Brent said earlier, these parameters are sort of understood by the people, but no one has really stood up, someone with real clout and prestige, to articulate them, then the ball game changes fundamentally.
How do you see the role of the President of the United States now? What advice would you give President Obama?
I think to let his positions on things like settlements and the demolition of homes in East Jerusalem, security of Israel overwhelmingly, unity of the Palestinian people in a government based on a free and fair election, cooperation with the Egyptians who are doing the negotiation between Hamas and the Israelis and so forth, to let his positions be very clear. As a matter of fact, the day before this meeting, I met with him and his National Security Advisor and his Secretary of State, and the day before that with his Special Envoy, former Senator George Mitchell. And I think they're feeling their way along very cautiously, but I think with determination to help bring about every possible opportunity for peace.
With respect to the position that the Obama administration has taken thus far on the Arab-Israeli dispute, I'm encouraged, because they have begun to engage in what looks to me to be a hands-on and aggressive way at the beginning of their administration. And they are not obviously going to wait till the very end to try and deal with the Arab-Israeli dispute. And too many times we've waited till the end of an administration to do that.
But I think now's the time to move comprehensively, not piecemeal, not confidence-building measures. We need to move decisively and comprehensively now.
Finally, Mr. President, you are a man of vision. You look ahead a long way. What happens after a peace agreement is made? What hope is there for a better life for the people of the Middle East and for the world?
One would be that Israel and all its neighbors could share the natural resources there, the water, the land, the mineral deposits, access to the Dead Sea. There could be a massive improvement in education, particularly among the Palestinians. An improvement in their very dilapidated and wanting system of health care. So there could be an equality of opportunities just in the way people live and work and get educated and have health care. The other thing that I see as a major opportunity would be the massive influx of tourists.
Yes.
If they could come there peacefully.
Tourism would be the economic engine to drive the whole region.
It could be perhaps the most important income for every country in the Holy Land.
And they have to do it together.
They have to do it together.
But I would add something more general and sort of maybe even more basic. It will give the Palestinians something that they haven't had, and that's dignity. And that is very important. It would give the Israelis something that they haven't had, an opportunity to participate in the prosperity of the Middle East. Think of Dubai,
and to be seen as part of the Middle East.
Qatar. They could together, because these are gifted peoples, the Israelis and the Palestinians, they could become the Singapore of the Middle East. So each would gain something very basic. Israelis' acceptance and prosperity, the Palestinians' dignity and self-respect.
It will turn the psychological climate of the Middle East around, both with respect to Israel and attitudes toward the United States. It would put Iran back on the defensive. It would steal the thunder from Hezbollah, Hamas, who feed on the discontent. It would end the refugee camps, a breeding ground for terrorism. It would give us a chance to move on the other issues in the Middle East with a positive support of the people of the region.
This is a special part of the world.
It is.
It's special to Christians, Jews, Muslims.
It's truly the Holy Land.
It is a holy
and it ought to
land.
be preserved by everyone.